Running back week is almost in the books before we get out of here and head to wide receiver week. Andy Backstrom in the middle of your screen. Tim May, the 41-year vet on the other side of your screen, noted arch nemesis of Paul Feinbaum, and me, Spencer Holbrook. We are here to give predictions about the Ohio State running back room. Tim, who's going to lead the Ohio State Buckeyes in rushing this year?
Oh, I thought you were going to say who's going to be the starter. I was all like that. You see that? It was a false start. -5. All right, get Travion in there. Oh, no, get Quinshon in there. I think Travion's going to end up being the starter just because of pecking order, and seniority. But I think Quinshon Judkins is going to get a lot of carries in this Chip Kelly offense. I'm going to go Quinshon Judkins. Final answer.
Andy?
Also going with Quinshon Judkins just because of the injury history of Travion Henderson. I think that's another reason why it's so important to have Quinshon Judkins is that we have not seen Travion Henderson have a complete season in the last couple of years. As dynamic as he's been, as home run hitting as he's been, he hasn't been able to fully stay healthy. And so I'm going Quinshon Judkins because of the durability and the production we've seen in the last couple of years.
I'll go contrarian on this then. I'm going to go Travion. I think the addition
he went Contravion on this. Go ahead.
Wow. I think we should get out of here on that note. Wow. That's a dad joke I would make, Tim. But you're actually a dad. I'm not. So I guess you're allowed to make that. I'm going to go Contravion here and go with Travion because I think the addition of Quinshon Judkins is almost going to be a little freeing for Travion Henderson. I don't think he's necessarily pressed at all times, but there are games where I think if you would ask an honest Travion Henderson, he would say that he's pressed a little bit, tried to hit the hole a little too often instead of taking what the defense has given him, tried to get to the end zone a little too often instead of kind of taking that 5 or 6 and almost taking your medicine on a certain play, getting 3 instead of -1 when the 3's there. And instead you end up with -4. I think this is going to be a little freeing for him, a little more relaxing, a little more just go out and play football and do it for, his purposes. His purpose is faith. And I think that also is going to be a little bit more freeing for him. He's going to be a relaxed player out there. And I do think that the decreased workload that comes with having Quinshon in there is going to allow Travion Henderson to stay healthier. And I don't think we saw that fully last year, even with Mayan Williams before he got hurt, even with Chip training before, he transferred out, with Dallin Hayden back in there, red shirting or whatever he was doing last year. Still bizarre to me. But I think that this move to add Quinshon Judkins is going to be a very positive thing for Travion Henderson. And so I think, in a year where I think both of these guys are going to hit 1,000 yards, maybe Travion just has, that one game with 211 yards that gets him over the top, and makes him the leading rusher on this team.
So you don't feel like with Quinshon Judkins possibly producing on a regular level, if in fact he does, that's not going to cause Travion to possibly press when he's in there to show, hey, I'm still the guy? Isn't that a dynamic that could develop in this whole scenario?
Yeah, Tim, I think 19-year-old freshman Travion Henderson would absolutely do that. And I think he would even tell you that. I think maybe, sophomore year Travion when he was hurt, absolutely, more than even freshman year would have done that. Even last year, I thought at times he was looking over his shoulder a little bit when Chip Trayanum started playing better. And in the games that Dallin Hayden got in there and played well, it can be a little, am I still the guy here?
Right.
I think that this is a completely different person than who he used to be. And I think he's more humble. I think he's more willing to accept a role. And I don't think that he was never like that. But I think that the way that he looks at his life right now, I just don't see him getting in his own head like that. I don't see him, trying to tell himself, you're the guy, go out there and be the guy, go out there and press. I just think that this entire outlook for him is different and changed and new. And I think it's going to be the best thing possible for Travion, not only here, but heading into the NFL. I think it's going to do wonders for him. Tim, I'll throw it right back to you, Tim. What's your bold prediction for the Ohio State running backs room this year?
I think it's going to produce my bold prediction. I'm not going to give you a necessarily yardage, but when you combine Travion Henderson, who I agree with you has matured before our eyes, and seems like really at peace with who he is and where he can go, and bringing people along with him. I think the combination of those two guys, he and Judkins, and then sprinkle in a little bit of James Peoples and Sam Williams-Dixon, I think this could be. I'm trying to think of record numbers, but I think this could be. You could see anywhere from a 22 to 2,800 yard production minimum in the run in the rushing realm of this Ohio State offense, and on a consistent basis. I think is what you're going to see, because it's going to be, for want of another term, demanded by Chip Kelly that they be able to run the ball. That includes throwing in the facet of an offensive line, which I think is really going to be improved compared to this time of year, compared to last year. So I see somewhere in the realm of 22 to 2,800 yards rushing. I was going to say minimum, but I guess that's a little bit variable with 22 to 2,800. But I see a really good rushing year for this 2024 Ohio State football team.
Andy?
Yeah, I'm already on record saying that both Quinshon and Travion will run for 1,000 or more. So that's not going to be my bold prediction, but I just need to repeat that because I've already said it once and I'll stick by it. I think that they're going to combine for 25 total touchdowns between the two of them.
Wow.
And I think that another prediction within that prediction is that Quinshon Judkins is going to have 5 receiving touchdowns. I think that little wheel route play we saw in the Student Appreciation Day, I thought that was Will Howard's best throw of that day. That resulted in about a 60-yard touchdown for Quinshon Judkins. Yeah, I think it struck me one of the first things he said when he came here was the Woody Hayes Athletic Center in January, talking to the media, and he was saying, he wants to be kind of like a Jahmyr Gibbs, one of those players that can be used out of the backfield as a receiver and as a runner. That was really appealing to him when Bill O'Brien was the offensive coordinator. Well, guess what? Chip Kelly likes to use his running backs in those ways too. I think that Quinshon Judkins as a receiver will also be really important this year. Not that Travion Henderson can't do that. We've seen him do that. Remember that 65-yard catch and run he had against Rutgers that got them right to the doorstep of the end zone last year. It's just that I feel like Quinshon Judkins is going to be the one finding the end zone more.
Yeah, and then Chip Kelly. Yeah, Chip. I mean, we're not just wheel routes. Obviously, I know you didn't mean that and stuff, but just little out route. I mean, just little outlets and stuff out of the backfield and stuff. Chip Kelly really likes defenses having to go one-on-one, man, as much as possible. And you get these two guys out on the edges or even in the middle with a little late power screen and stuff like that. I mean, you're exact. Both of these running backs, the top 2 running backs, I think, are quite capable of exploiting those kind of plays. So, I know Chip Kelly's head is just rolling right now with possibilities that circle on having 2 very capable running backs. I'm sorry, Spence. I didn't mean to jump in there.
No, you're all good, Tim. My bold prediction for this unit is there has never been a split of the Big Ten Running Back of the Year award. And for some reason, somehow, Ohio State hasn't won that award since 2015. J.K. Dobbins didn't win it because everyone got so enamored with Jonathan Taylor, who ran behind the best offensive line in college football and was good, but J.K. Dobbins had 2,000 yards and exactly the exact amount of rushing yards that Jonathan Taylor had. And they should have split it that year because Jonathan Taylor had 2,003 rushing yards and J.K. Dobbins had 2,003 rushing yards. They had the
is this where I can jump in and go, amen? Amen.
Jonathan Taylor was great. He still is good. J.K. Dobbins has ran into injuries in the NFL, but no one cares about the NFL when you're voting on the Big Ten Running Back of the Year. He should have won the award in 2019, but Ohio State hasn't won that award since 2015 with Ezekiel Elliott. And guess what? Yes, voters will split decisions on Travion or Quinshon if they both go over 1,000 yards. I don't care. They're going to split the award.
I don't care.
Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins are going to split the Big Ten Running Back of the Year award. They'll both be in contention for All-American status. They might not even be able to be consensus because one's on one list, one's on another, depending on the flavor of choice for some of these voters who fly by the seat of their own pants sometimes. So, I think that this is the year that they finally get back on track with that award and Ohio State wins another one. And I think that it's going to be a split between the two. And maybe that's a cop-out because I'm not choosing one or the other. But I guess since I chose Travion to be the leading rusher on the team, that would mean he would probably win the award. But I think they should split it. And I think they will split it. That's my bold prediction for the year.
Yeah, and by the way, real quick, in that 2019, I think the all the conference awards came out the week of the Big Ten title game, if I'm not mistaken, right? And in the Big Ten title game, J.K. Dobbins rushed for 172 yards and a TD, and Jonathan Taylor rushed for 148 and a TD. That was a pretty good game, but still, I see where you're coming from there.
Yeah, he was a Minnesota 200-yard game, and then he would have 11 yards in that
Yeah.
regular season game against Ohio State. But
Yeah.
whatever. I digress, as Tim May would say. The bold prediction here is that Ohio State will finally get back in that award. Andy, any other closing thoughts on Lettermen Row running back week, on predictions for the running back room? Anything that you feel like we have not given its due this week on Lettermen Row running back week? I think we've covered a lot, but what do you got?
Yeah, well, Tim has talked about this. We talked about this last offseason. We wanted to use 2 running backs on the field at the same time. We saw that a bit last year. I think we're going to see that a whole lot more this season. I think that's how you kind of split up this, workload, or I guess not split it up, have them both on the field at the same time. I think we're going to see that a lot. And Quinshon Judkins, like you said, Tim, it's not just going to be wheel routes or screen passes. Even last year, Ole Miss saw him line up in the slot out wide. Like, they're going to do that with probably both Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. We're probably going to see some of that split back formation we saw last year at times that they used with Xavier Johnson and Travion Henderson. Maybe, they find ways to use Sam Williams-Dixon or James Peoples in a role like that as well. I think that we're going to see a lot of creativity. They're going to get creative with the tight ends as well to free up some space in those running lanes. We're going to see some really interesting stuff from the run game. And as much as they've talked about Ohio State in the passing game and how that's been really the Ryan Day era and these quarterbacks, it wouldn't surprise me if the appeal this season is the run game. And again, a lot of that's dependent on this offensive line. So there's a big if there. But I think that they could be really fun to watch to see what they do with all these moving parts. And I think the term that still is in my head from that coaches clinic that Chip Kelly talked about is confusement. It's a combination of confusion and movement, and just moving these pieces around in the run game. And not so that it's super complex, but it's just a lot of, simplistic motions. They can be confusing for defenses because you're showing different looks.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most appealing thing when I hear about this run game and why I think it could be quite effective.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the thing that the thing that's going to be real again is there's going to be true option plays again in this offense, which you didn't really have with C.J. Stroud. You didn't really have with Cal McCord. And no matter which quarterback ends up with the job, although we do believe Will Howard will end up with it initially for sure. But for sure, why did I say believe for sure? But we do believe Will Howard will be the starter. But I still don't count Devin Brown out of the mix. The point is they're going to be true option plays, not fake option plays. That doesn't even make sense because you can fake the option. But that's what stands out. And when you get 2 true running backs who are proven on the field with a quarterback who can run, who you have to understand defensively, this guy is a threat running the ball. Now you really got something going for you. And fellas, I don't think we're going to see a lot of what I'm talking about until they get to maybe the start of the Big Ten and or maybe Iowa the week before they go to Oregon, where I think you could see a lot of things come out that you haven't seen before. But you got to believe Chip Kelly strikes me as a guy smart enough to be throwing things out there for a defensive coordinator to have to really start concerning himself with about covering the waterfront. Just like you said, confusement. He's going to be throwing things out there for all of our confusement. I think the first several games, just to set up some things he would definitely like to get to in some of the big matchups he's got coming this season.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I think back to what Chip did with LaMichael James and Kenyon Barner in 2011, where Barner almost had 1,000 yards. LaMichael James had, I think, 1,700. Look at what Carlos Loughlin did when he was a running back assistant at Memphis with a couple of guys who were really good. Darrell Henderson, the big name there. Look at what Ryan Day did in 2018 when Ohio State seemingly couldn't run the ball ever, but they still had 2 guys over 900 yards rushing, Mike Weber and J.K. Dobbins. J.K. had the 2,000 yards in 19. The list goes on and on. You look at what Loughlin did last year at Oregon. You look at what Chip Kelly did a couple years ago at UCLA with Zach Charbonnet and Britton Brown. Like, they all of the entire staff, and that includes Justin Fry with that Chip Kelly UCLA team. The entire staff has extensive experience with 2 running backs. Tim, go ahead.
Oh, no, I just wanted to make sure you called on me again before we wrap this up. Carlos Loughlin, I mean, we all like Tony Alford for all kinds of reasons, But Carlos Loughlin, this may maybe go down as one of Ryan Day's really good hires, because I think he brings a total different mindset to the coaching of running backs, and he's going to be demanding, because he's a guy who had to prove himself, as we talked about on an earlier video. He's a guy that had to prove himself all along, throw himself into the ranks, show that desire to be a coach, but then come along. He expects that from his running backs. He expects these guys to all run hard, to all have literally no excuses once they step across the line, etc. And I'm really curious to see how that's going to play out with this running backs room. I think y'all are too. Y'all are too, aren't you? I ran out of air there.
Absolutely.
100%.
Running back week in the books. Lettermen Row will have a little bit of a recap of it before we get on to wide receivers week. Next week, a big one with wide receivers week. We're going to talk Emeka Buka, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis. You know all the names, Brian Hartline. You love all the names. Now we're going to break down all the names at lettermenrow.com next week. Then we'll get into tight ends, offensive line, defensive line, right on down the line, as Mr. Tim May, the 41-year vet, likes to say. That's Tim May on the other side of your screen. That's Andy Backstrom in the middle there. That's it. Putting a pin in running backs week. We're moving on outside to the wide receivers and throwing the dang ball. For Andy, for Tim, I'm just Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Head to lettermenrow.com. Recap our full coverage of running back week at lettermenrow.com, and we'll see you guys over there, and we'll see you back on the YouTube channel next week for some wide receiver talk.